Good afternoon, and thank you to all of you who are joining us here today for the World Halal Business Conference 2021, hosted by the Ministry of International Trade and Industry and organized by the Halal Development Corporation of Malaysia. My name is Rozina Aziz, co-founder and CEO of Metamorphosa. I'm also the co-anchor of Astro Awani's multi-platform talk show, Leader Speakeasy with Rizal and Rozina. Today, I have the great pleasure of moderating this parallel session titled Fostering a Robust Islamic Finance Ecosystem Through Digitalization. Before I introduce the esteemed panel of experts, let me first of all take you through the format of today's 60-minute session. We will be joined by a panel of esteemed guests, and I will moderate a 30-minute discussion on our topic for today. Following that, there will be a 15-minute Q&A session where the panelists will take turns to pick questions from members of the audience. We invite you to post your questions anytime during the panel discussion, and be sure to state your name, email address, and indicate to which panelist your question is addressed. Depending on time, we may not be able to take all your questions today. Rest assured that the Halal Development Corporation will email answers from panelists to you within 48 hours. Next, just a quick housekeeping rules for the best experience. Ensure that you have a strong and stable Wi-Fi connection. Your microphones have been put on silent to ensure that our session goes smoothly. Kindly note that this session is being recorded. Setting the stage for our discussion for today, the global Islamic financial services industry grew to an estimated $2.7 trillion in 2021, sustaining its growth momentum at a rate of 10.7% year-on-year in 2020. Islamic banking accounts for the bulk of it at 68.2%, while Islamic capital markets command 30.9%, but while that's relatively smaller, it enjoys a far higher growth rate of 26.9%. In Q3 2020, global Islamic financial assets stood at $1.84 trillion, and Malaysia ranks third in terms of global Islamic financial assets after Saudi Arabia and Iran. Moving on, we will also be looking at Islamic Fintech, where, according to the Global Islamic Fintech Report 2021, produced by Dinar Standards and Ellipsis, the volume of transactions within the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries, is expected to grow to $128 billion by 2025, at a CAGR of 21% compared to the lower CAGR of only 15% for conventional fintechs. Countries leading the Islamic fintech space are Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, followed by Malaysia and Indonesia. The MDEC Islamic Fintech Report indicates that in terms of the number of Islamic fintech, Malaysia is #1 on the global stage with 26 Islamic fintechs, followed by the UK at 19, UAE 16, Indonesia 12, and USA 1. According to the Malaysian Fintech Report 2021, Malaysia is home to 233 fintechs. There are many opportunities for growth, as Asia Pacific is home to 2/3 of the global Muslim population. And the Islamic banking is gaining popularity amongst non-Muslim. In Southeast Asia, 70% of adults within its 668 million populations are still unbanked. And here in Malaysia, 55% of adults are either unbanked or underbanked. So the opportunities are very, very clear. With the stage set, let me just now explain what sort of topics that we will explore with the esteemed panel of experts. First, we will explore the importance of digitalization and a robust digital ecosystem to ensure continued growth of the Islamic finance industry. We look at industry trends, opportunities and risk, and how they can be addressed through the convergence of Islamic finance with digitalization. Crucial areas for digital investment is pertinent, the desired impact, as well as some best practices. And the experts will also weigh in if there are any gaps to be addressed by industry players and bodies like MDEC. So the impact of Islamic finance, including Islamic Fintech, for which Malaysia is #1, what is that impact on the halal industry, including SMEs? We look at the end-to-end ecosystem needed to foster growth, encourage new entrepreneurs, covering initiatives such as HDC's Halal Integrated Platform, and of course, we'll be talking to MDEC on their initiatives. We will also take a longer-term look at the top future growth areas for the key players, as well as what MDEC sees as the future growth, which will be enabled by digitalization and a robust digital ecosystem. So without further ado, on behalf of the Halal Development Corporation of Malaysia, please join me to welcome our esteemed panelists. Firstly, please welcome Tunku Nasaifuddin Mudzaffar, Chief Executive Officer of Microleap, an Islamic and conventional peer-to-peer microfinancing platform. A former banker, Tunku has worked in senior positions in London and Kuala Lumpur at both Standard Chartered and BNP Paribas in diverse fields, from asset liability management and money market sales to financial institutions coverage. Prior to founding Microleap, Tunku had 15 years of financial services experience. Microleap is a Malaysian fintech company that helps underserved businesses access crowdsourced funds. Tunku, I hope you've adjusted to the weather after coming back from UK. How are you doing today?
Yes, Assalamualaikum. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. I have my digital tag. I'm quarantining for 2 weeks, but it's been great, thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing from you. Next up, we are pleased to welcome Noor Farilla Abdullah. She is Chief Strategy Officer of Strategic Management Division of the Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, or BIMB. Noor Farilla graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Warwick and spent most of her professional career in business transformation, program management, and complex project implementation. She started at Accenture, consulting agencies and organizations involved in driving the multimedia supercorridor implementation. She joined Bank Islam as Chief Strategy Officer in January 2019, where she leads the planning, implementation, and benefits realization of the bank's transformation program. So Noor Farilla, I believe that keeps you full up and fully busy. Thank you for making the time to join us.
Thank you very much, Rozina. It's an honor to be sitting with the panelists.
We look forward to hearing from you later. And the final member of our panel of experts is Ruslena, Ramli, Director Fintech and Islamic Digital Economy of the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, what we usually call MDEC. So MDEC is the lead agency to implement the MSC Malaysia initiative and aims to establish Malaysia as the heart of digital ASEAN, a regional digital powerhouse launching global champions to lead the fourth industrial revolution, ensuring our digital economy will drive shared prosperity for all Asians. Ruslena Ramli is an Islamic finance advocate with over 20 years of experience, and her banking repertoire includes corporate strategy, sukuk and bond issuance advisory, and developing Islamic banking products. Ruslena brings to MDEC her expertise in Sharia compliant structures and established relationships with Islamic finance communities, both locally and abroad. Ruslena Ramli, welcome. We're very happy to have you on the panel of experts today.
Thank you, Rozina. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today, and a warm welcome to all people who have dialed in from across the globe. You know, we look forward to sharing our experiences and also learning about what other activities are also happening within the industry currently.
So thank you, Rozina. We can't wait. So thank you once again to all the esteemed panelists. So to set the stage for the first question, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the global Islamic finance industry has weathered the storm well, and many opportunities lie ahead. The pandemic has forced companies to squeeze 5 or more years of digitalization into a much shorter time frame. So let's first of all look at the trends within the industry and how players have embraced digitalization to mitigate risk and, more importantly, capitalize on opportunities in these pandemic times. Let me first turn to our first panelist, Tunku Nasaifuddin Mudzaffar. As you know, Tunku is Chief Executive Officer of Microleap. Tunku, fintech players like yourself disrupt the market, fully embracing technology. So during the pandemic, I have a few questions for you. How do fintech's ability, agility, and digital readiness give you an advantage over traditional players in mitigating risk and grabbing opportunities fast? Because we know there's a lot of opportunities on the table. So what are perhaps some of the few critical trends that you can share affecting global and local Islamic fintech players? We heard earlier Islamic fintech represents, actually we heard from MDEC that Islamic fintech represents 26 of the 233 fintechs in Malaysia. And we were just wondering what were the growth areas during the pandemic. And for the fintech industry, what are some of your early learnings on where digitalization has produced wins and whether at all there is anything that's lacking? Tunku.
Thank you. It's a very long question. First thing, I don't like the word disrupt. You know, when the word disrupt comes along, when my son comes home and the teacher says he's being very disruptive, it's not good. So I think it's more about enabling, changing, pushing forward. I think that those are the words that we should use for fintech rather than disruption. So in terms of, as you rightly said, you know, people are going digital, digitalization is happening right now. But Islamic fintech is there and ready. You know, as a fintech player, we were born with having financial and technology at hand. We don't have legacy systems that are old and you know and are hard to change for many financial institutions. For fintech, the first thing you look at is the technology aspects of it. How can technology help you to get to your customers, get to your users? That is the main proposition that fintech players do. And being an Islamic fintech player, how do we do that in a Sharia compliant way? So during the crisis, Islamic fintech players are more or less born ready for this. And in fact, you know, 2020 has been a stellar year for many Islamic fintech players. If you look at my market, especially the P2P or peer-to-peer financing market, you know, it's gone leaps and bounds. And in fact, according to an SC report, P2P and also ECF, which is actually crowdfunding growth, has outstripped private equity and VC fund growth for the first time ever. You know, so it just shows that, you know, being technology enabled and technology ready in this COVID times is great, and we should grab those opportunities.
So that's great news for Islamic fintech and conventional fintech too. Let me now turn to our next panelist, Farilla Abdullah. As you know, she is Chief Strategy Officer of Strategic Management Division of Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad. Farilla, banking is being disrupted, by emerging technologies, fintechs, as well as emerging trends. Banking is seen as sometimes traditional, highly risk-averse, and slow to embrace digitalization, arguably. As compared to fintechs, banks are more highly regulated, and Islamic banks need to further observe additional Sharia compliance requirements, and this may affect your ability to innovate and change fast. Yet, the industry has seen the emergence of Islamic challengers or digital-only banks, and Malaysia in fact launched the first digital sukuk through online web platforms. And Bank Negara Malaysia has announced that by next year, they will issue up to 5 digital banking licenses. So exciting times ahead for the industry during the pandemic. Maybe share your thoughts on what were the trends, risks, and opportunities that drove the industries and your own digitalization decisions when it comes to convergence between digitalization and Islamic banking. How do you feel the global players have, whether they've done enough? And what are your thoughts on, you know, as you take Bank Islam through digitalization, what are the early hits and misses in preparing for growth?
All right, Rozina. Banks always get a bad rep, you know, when it's juxtaposed against fintechs. So on trends, what we've seen really is the move to online banking mode, and that has been really, really accelerated. And it's in the same vein as the increase of e-commerce and cashless payments. So for us, between 2020 and 2019, we saw the reduction of our physical channel transactions is only about 3%, but the increase of our digital channels transaction was 31%, right? And in terms of absolute number, the number of transactions for digital channels already surpassed the physical channels. So that's the number one trend that got accelerated. The second one is the gig and freelance work. Nationally, I read a report that we were at about 30% in 2020, right? And in 2019, EPF made a projection that we would be at 40% by 2024. And I believe this number is going to be accelerated because now it's become a habit, going into freelance, going into gig. The other one is working from home and online schooling is already prevalent. And there is a need for collaboration tools. How do you effectively conduct design thinking in a virtual workshop? Before virtual, you put up, you know, mahjong papers on the wall, you write on post-its, you paste the post-its, you walk around the room, spy on other teams, you joke around, absorb energy, transfer energy, but you can't do that, right, in a virtual session. So, you know, tools like Miro, you know, now used. And also, we see accelerated democratization of education, of training, like, you know, webinars, MBA online. There's so many of that that's available and promoted. And the culture of helping, I think we've seen the best of humanity, the philanthropy, the volunteerism, the sadaqah, the infaq. From a risk perspective, typically, you know, with more digitalization, there will be privacy issues because of use of data. Cybersecurity continues to be a threat, and would this accentuate the divide when it comes to financial inclusion, right? So some of the opportunities that we see is that there would be market access to businesses that may have been unimaginable, not because that we lack infrastructure, but because the mindset was bordered before the pandemic, right? And then, of course, use of data. To understand behaviors of customers and for businesses to innovate. Like in Bank Islam, we invest a lot on customer journey because those who capture customers win. Upskilling of workforce, because of democratization of education and training, can also now be frictionless, right? So an example, oh, we need an additional data scientist because we've got a use case. So you can probably just go to a marketplace, you know, or you know, in a week, train somebody internally. And
let's hold that thought for a while. We'll get more into it in the later session. Let me now turn to our final panelist, Ruslena Ramli. She's Director, Fintech and Islamic Digital Economy, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC. Ruslena, the digital economy now represents 20% of Malaysia's GDP, and MDEC is championing that. How well do you feel, from MDEC's perspective, have Islamic finance players embraced digitalization, and what are their core areas of digital focus globally and here in Malaysia? How does MDEC itself help and add value to the local industry, especially maybe the SME players, and in light of the pandemic, you know, adoption of new technologies, you know, they need help to weather the impact of the pandemic if they're not as lucky as some fintechs who are growing leaps and bounds during these difficult times. Are we on par with global players? So let's hear it from Rozina of MDEC.
Okay, so some of the figures that you've voiced out earlier was, as at end 2019, total GDP for ICT sector has now contributed to about $289 billion. That represents closely to about 19%. So according to the My Digital Blueprint, we want to grow this to 23%. Of GDP by 2025, and that represents more than $70 billion. So there's a lot of opportunities for Malaysia's digital economy. And as Malaysia celebrates our 25th anniversary this year, we are the undisputed reputable leader for game changer in digital and ICT landscape in Malaysia. And we want to continue to be at the forefront in helping our tech and fintech players in driving digital change to enable the nation to be deeply integrated with technology, providing equitable digital opportunities for all people and also businesses. So as mentioned earlier again, you mentioned that of Malaysia's leadership in terms of Islamic fintech, yes, we are #1 according to the latest report. Tunku Danny can also attest that he is our Islamic fintech poster boy. And I like to give a shout out, and Microleap has done a phenomenal job, especially during the pandemic, in terms of helping the MSMEs and also the B40s, because these were the people who were really affected by the pandemic. And a lot of these MSMEs needed to pivot to technology to survive, because otherwise, how are they going to even feed themselves? Pay for basic skills and utilities? And it is these players like Microleap, and I like to also give a shout out to companies like Surinai under Amna, and she is through her halal, verified halal app. She has now grown her country base to about 172 countries, listed 50 over 1,000 halal companies from across the globe, and reached out to about 2.7 million units of products. So all you have to do is, you take your phone and you tick any food products or pharmaceutical, all those would then be listed in terms of the types of certification that they do. Another company that I like to also highlight is Create Wales. Sharia Will founder is Raymond. So they have also done phenomenally well to even enter UK. In terms of Muslim population, is one of the smallest, compared to Malaysia, and he's done well in going into those countries in providing Sharia compliant halal. And then one more company is Missing Kira Umar. He's also during the pandemic helped 1,000 over plus merchants in facilitating everything just through this mobile app. And you never leave home without your phone, without your mobiles these days, right? And I think we've done a phenomenal job in engaging the market, in helping the SMEs and MSMEs and B40s. And on the digital side, some statistics that we like to share is that we've reached out as at end 2020, close to about 500 over SMEs who have adopted e-commerce, trained close to about 400,000 SMEs with regards to e-commerce as well. And the total sector has attracted to the country 1.5 billion worth of investments.
And there's a lot of opportunities in place. And with that, Rozina, thank you so much for your thoughts. And we'd like to move to the next question. So digitalization, I think it's all exciting, the views that we've got from the esteemed panelist. Digitalization creates a much needed agile ecosystem that enables players to innovate, offer creative solutions and differentiated customer experience with new markets and scale fast. Perhaps we want to know in which areas digital investments, particularly in the Islamic finance and halal industry, be most critical, because we've heard about all the growth that's happened and growth potential. So what would be the most critical to prime industry players for growth and enable Malaysia to defend and probably fortify our position in the global Islamic finance industry, including Islamic fintech? Maybe share some of the best practices for others to learn from. So we talk about ecosystem. I think investing is just one part of implementation, but to fully reap the benefits, we want to understand whether that is a holistic enough ecosystem to support the needs of all industry players. And if there is a gap, then what needs to be done about it? And of course, with all these exciting opportunities, we're getting a lot of questions on will the Islamic finance and halal industries work hand in hand? Because there's opportunities in both markets, and how would they work hand in hand in terms of digitalization initiatives? So let us turn first of all to what Ruslena calls the poster boy for Islamic fintech, the poster CEO, Tunku Nasaifuddin Mudzaffar from Microleap. Tunku Dani, fintech companies are nimble and agile, but as compared to players like Bank Islam and the bigger banks, they have deeper pockets. Yeah. So if you look at the opportunities, we look at the unbanked population, the size of Southeast Asia, how would you go and grab the growth? But you need to overcome the financial disadvantage. And then with that growth, how do you see Islamic fintech disrupting the halal industry? And maybe share with us what are your core digital investments and how does the Malaysia digital come into play? Perhaps you could share with us your perspective, Tunku Dani?
Yes, I think when it comes to fintech players and banks, I don't think we should see it as always in competition. I think what fintech players can do is provide either an alternative and also and partnerships with banks. I mean, the whole point of fintech and Islamic fintech is that we can reach out to areas that most banks can't, because we don't have a big branch model. We don't have big branches up and down the country. Our branch is basically your smartphone, and with Malaysia's, smartphone penetration rates at 78% in 2018, according to the Multimedia Commission, the reach is there. So digital financial services, or even better, Islamic digital financial services, is there at our fingertips. And we are, as Islamic fintech player, we are able to reach out to these kind of rural areas, places that you can't get a branch out there. You don't. It's maybe hard to get to. We are only limited by bandwidth and internet penetration and use of smartphones. So that is how we scale up very, very quickly by doing that. So and always in my industry, the alternative financing space, we will always be an alternative financing product. In UK and US, alternative finance is 20% of the total financing landscape. In Malaysia, it's only about 3 to 5% of the landscape. So there's a lot of growth there for Islamic fintech and fintech players. But I always think that we should work hand in hand with banks rather than trying to compete with banks.
That's an excellent shared experience and thoughts from Tunku Dani. Thank you. Now I think it's time for us to move to Noor Farilla. It's time to dispel the perception that banks are conservative, traditional, and not adapting to change. I know certainly Bank Islam is committed to digitalization, laying the foundation for a fully digital banking platform and establishing a new digital arm called the Center of Digital Excellence. So with the vibrant changes in the industry, we'd like to look at where you feel players like yourself are on the global, maybe local industry digitalization curve, and how do you see Islamic banking and the halal industry converging through digitization? Perhaps, what's your priority in the areas and the impact, and certainly with the growth potential both in Islamic banking and what we saw in Islamic fintech. What are some of the collaborations that can take place? Are there gaps that people like MDEC could help you with? Because certainly we will hear from Ruslena at the end. So without further ado, I invite Noor Farilla to share her perspective.
Right. Thank you, Rozina. So on the digitalization curve at the moment, Bank Islam, I would say, is catching up with the ambition to be at the frontier. So our strategy is we adopt a two-speed digitalization strategy, where for the main or the mothership bank, we have a transformation program to systematically digitize and digitalize the bank. And the range of initiatives that we undertake for transformation can range from, pure automation of manual processes using RPA, robotic process automation. We establish new capabilities of data science, data analytics that can only be enabled by technology. We also, have to reduce our tech debt by replacing systems and applications. And we also introduce new digital channels or improving the CX of existing digital channels. So most fintechs actually get involved in the latter on the CX side. The speedboat if you may, is a digital bank proposition where there is more latitude for experimentation and mistakes, because we isolate the risks from the main bank, the mothership. It's greenfield, therefore we are able to move at speed because we're not encumbered by legacy. And it's a bank that we've designed on the cloud with a proposition that is based on an ecosystem play, targeting particular segments with the vision to create financial well-being of our customers. So we also do get the fintechs heavily involved in our ideation here. And so to talk about the convergence of Islamic banking and the halal industry to digitalization, right? We need to understand the problem statements of the industry. So we did a very brief study in 2019, and some of the pain points that we uncovered by talking to some of the players is that there's fragmented value chain. There's lack of visibility of halal certified suppliers. I know there's been a huge leapfrog since 2019 in this area. Ruslena mentioned Verify Halal. Amna has done a great job. When it comes to fragmented value chain, there's also information everywhere, low awareness on halal industry, and importantly is the market access. This companies, businesses require customers. How do they get those market access, not just within the country, but regionally? Then, of course, as a bank, we look at the financing side, the financing issues. So some of the pain points that were raised were the cost of doing business is higher because there's additional compliance cost to meet the requirements under halal certification. And the one that cuts across all SMEs, whether they're in the halal industry or not, is the cash flow payment issues and lack of funding, something that Tunku Danny mentioned just now. So, some of the opportunities of convergence here would lie with, and this is by no means exhaustive, plugging into a digital halal supply chain ecosystem, right? End-to-end visibility of supply chain enables banks to have a holistic understanding of the business to facilitate timely financing. Co-creation, right? So it's not about monopolizing certain things, but it's co-creation. I like what Tunku Danny mentioned just now about collaboration. So we can co-create marketplaces where players come together. And Bank Islam actually recently launched SME Expert to facilitate this. So last year, at the start of the pandemic, we, with the Fintech Accelerator and other partners, actually embarked on finding a solution to some of these problem statements. So it's a journey, right? Interesting business models and concepts that came through, but still requires MVP sandboxing. So I'm looking forward for that journey.
Excellent sharing. Thank you very much, Noor, Farilla. I think it's really interesting when you guys talk about the opportunities in collaboration in different areas. I think what we would like to do is to look at having a holistic and robust digital ecosystem to further collaborative growth collectively. I understand that HDC has initiated the Halal Integrated Platform with the long-term goal of encouraging and facilitating SMEs to obtain halal certification from JAKIM and to develop intervention programs that assist halal industry businesses grow and become global players. So of course, there are other bodies and agencies that will also contribute to creating an ecosystem such as that. So from MDEC's perspective, a very important player here, because you are the champion of the digital economy. So how has Malaysian digital economy been effective, and what ecosystem, including MDEC itself, is in place to push Islamic finance digitalization and develop more Islamic fintech poster boys like Tunku Danny, and as well as the halal entrepreneurs, on a wide, in the wider industry. What are some exciting initiatives that we've heard from Farilla just now? What are some of the exciting initiatives to firmly establish Malaysia as a global leader in Islamic fintech? Because we are number one, but we want to make sure that we stay number one. And do you see market consolidation as there are more players? Do you do you see super players, super apps? And finally, what are your thoughts on domestic and cross-border collaborations?
Okay. So, I mean, the fintech community is very much in sync in terms of all our programs, initiatives. I love the energy that's coming up from Farilla. You know, as we engage with communities, Islamic finance community, not just locally and also abroad, it's about how we can make it better for all academic sectors as we pivot into tech and also fintech. So among the initiatives that we have embarked on, so this came out from the regulatory sandbox with Bank Negara in 2016. So the FinTech Booster was launched in August 2020. So it had 3 pillars, which was legal and compliance, business model, and also technology and infrastructure. So these 3 key pillars were basically the pain points of the FinTech industry. In wanting to come and understand, okay, what do they need to do first? You know, what are the next steps in growing the ecosystem and also their businesses? So through this one-stop platform, we allow players from across the globe, and we've had close to about 500 applicants that have come in since the launch itself, local and also globally. And through this first pillar of legal and compliance, we secured partnership with almost 11 legal companies who offer their services pro bono. So, and it's to facilitate that process in helping these players to come in and make Malaysia as the hotbed for fintech and also fintech. We also engage with other regulators. So SE launched their FICRA accelerator in July this year, together with UNCDF, which specifically looks at Islamic capital market products. We also work with INSEF. They were the neutral party for the iConnect FinTech and Islamic Finance. So this is a 4 million matching grant by MOSTI and also Academy Science Malaysia. So as you can see, the prominence of Islamic finance features very strong in the acceleration of the FinTech and also tech-based companies. So it's this demand that we create would feed the supply chain in terms of the players to come in and be attracted to also provide innovative solutions. So when you talk about a super app, you know, there are industry engagements in looking how we could have an integrated platform where everybody provides solutions onto this one particular platform where the cost is shared. So when the cost is shared, you are able to bring down that cost and make it very cost competitive for people who are not able to afford takaful, for example. And you know, there's issues with regards to the government in wanting to bring in more for Perlindungan Tangan and also our MySalam. So it's the various sectors under Islamic capital markets, and I strongly believe that because we are the leader for banking, sukuk, asset management, and also takaful, that these will feature very prominently as we move forward in driving change for the Islamic digital economy.
That's really interesting. Is there anything else on the cross-border collaboration side that you want to really focus on?
So on the cross-collaboration side, because I know I got caught up with the first part because I explained too much.
Yes, I did see this come back to it.
Okay, so under MDEC, we've got a lot of initiatives. So there's 2 core initiatives that I like to talk about is the Gain Connects and also Gain Expand. So through Gain Connects and Gain Expand is we collaborate with 12 ecosystem partners, specifically countries or partner countries that is in Asia. So the likes of Indonesia, Hong Kong, Australia, in providing market access to our tech companies. So under the tech ecosystem and globalization, we are the guardians to roughly about 800 companies. And of that is that 26 companies which Tunku resides in. So it's providing market access to all these fintech players, not just on the business side, and also for funding. So under our ambit, we have about 120 VC companies, venture capitalist companies, and close to 80% of that are foreign. So it's providing or becoming that enabler as a strong ecosystem partner that makes MDEC that tipping point or the catalyst in helping local tech companies to become the unicorns of Asia. And you know, a shout out to Qasim, who has been our very first, and we are looking to have 5 more as part of our Digital 5 strategies, which we just launched in July.
So that's excellent. In fact, so I did get back to you on that. So I hope we've all had you know, the opportunity to learn a lot from the panel of experts who have joined us here today. I'd like to invite all the audience joining us, from across the globe, to submit your questions. You may submit your questions, but do state your name, your email address, and the panelist to whom your question is addressed. So we hope to address your question. At the end of the session, we have a 15-minute Q&A session. Actually, the panelists are also free to ask each other questions later. And if we do not have the time to answer all the questions, HDC will be happy to email the answers to your questions to you within 48 hours after the end of this session. So we've had a really great discussion with the panelists, and it's just great to feel the energy and the excitement of what the future brings. So we've talked about digitalization. We've talked about how a lot of the fintech players are in with digitalization up front, and then we talked about non-traditional banks, taking on that digitalization drive. And of course, we've heard how MDEC and other bodies are driving that whole digital economy. And we've heard how we can see convergence across the industries. So before we proceed with the Q&A segment, I would like to wrap this discussion by asking each panelist. We've talked about laying the foundation for digitalization. We've talked about having a holistic ecosystem. We've talked about how successful the strategies digitalization have been so far across the industry, and we've seen the growth. Now, assuming that we have digitalization well on its way, and we have a very robust ecosystem for the Islamic finance industry, and that feeds into the halal industry. What do you see as the long-term growth, having got all these plans together? What are the top 3 future growth areas that each of you would capitalize on, that you will go for? So, because, the investment has, to produce growth. So let's start with our first panelist, Tunku Dani, Nasaifuddin, Mudzaffar. Tunku Dani?
For us, in terms of our growth plans, and the top 3 future growth areas for us is, one is partnerships. We cannot just grow on our own. So we have inked deals with MTDC, Malaysian Technology Development Corporation, where we help do P2P financing for technology companies. We've about to sign off with a deal with a development bank to help finance agro-tech companies. Because we have the reach. The banks have the funds, but they don't have the reach to these small, basic micro enterprises who need this financing for agro-tech. So we are reaching out through partnerships. Is how we grow. Also, number 2 is we want to grow regionally. First, we want to be strong in Malaysia, and then the first step is, as most Islamic fintechs players want to go, is Indonesia. Largest Muslim population in the world, but it's very fragmented. There's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of risk involved. So we do want to go to Indonesia next. And the third growth, actually, for me, how you measure an Islamic fintech company is not by the number of Muslim users you have on your platform. It's the number of non-Muslim users you have on your platform, because then it shows there is global reach, and it is not just catering to a segment of the population. Malaysia is 60% Muslim, right? If we just reach out to them, we hit the ceiling, you're not going to grow. But if you look at the beauty of our religion, the beauty of Islam, right? How ethical investments and Islamic principles go hand in hand, this will reach out to the non-Muslim users. So in fact, on our platform, we don't just have Muslim investors, we also have non-Muslim investors on our platform as well. So that's my top 3 growth areas.
So at Microleap, you certainly have both the Islamic side as well as the conventional side, and it's exciting to hear about your future growth areas through partnerships, growth through Indonesia, as well as hitting the non-Muslim market. Thanks so much, Tunku Dani. Next, I'd like to pose the same question to Noor Farilla. Noor Farilla, can we hear from Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad's perspective?
Yeah. So Bank Islam commits to be a value-based intermediary. And what that means is that we want to enable the nation to produce internationally competitive businesses. Right? And halal businesses is a natural sector for us. Businesses that do good to the environment, are socially responsible, have high standards of governance. We want to finance their growth. We want to provide liquidity for them to be the regional champions. We want to grow with them. So that's the first thrust when it comes to value-based intermediary. The second one is we also want to promote effective wealth circulation. And I mentioned just now, we've seen the best of humanities during this pandemic where philanthropic funds and Islamic social finance funds like zakat, sedekah and wakaf are deployed to those who need them. In fact, Bank Islam has gone a step further by providing micro financing to enable this small entrepreneurs, right? Or potential entrepreneurs to get skills and seed capital to start small so that they can transform from now being a zakat recipient to being a zakat giver ultimately. So, you know, the microfinance products that we have here is 𝗙𝗢𝗡 and Bangkit. So this kind of like wraps the other two proposition that we have, which is wealth management that is also connected to the social finance. So digitalization is really at the core, and our investment is actually a lot to do with digitalization. How do we enable all this, right? Without the building blocks of big data? How do we get deeper insights on understanding the customers 360 degrees if we don't have that data? Without open APIs platform, how do we plug in into a digital ecosystem with speed and without access to data points, right? How do we measure impact of our social finance initiatives so we can achieve more effectiveness and we can, you know, continuously improve? So I would say that, you know, the growth area we are really concentrating on is really in digitalization driving the business sectors.
That's excellent to hear. And the same question I'd like to now pose to Ruslena Ramli to hear from MDEC's perspective. Ruslena?
Before I begin, Tunku Dani, takkanlah, you know, MDEC tak tolong langsung, tak ada sebut pun satu pun.
Actually, yeah, MDEC helped a lot. So yeah. I wanted you to say it, so okay.
Okay, so to the question, Rozina. I mean, the three core areas from MDEC, specifically for me, because I had the Islamic digital economy, I have vested interest in looking out for the Islamic digital economy. And under the Islamic digital economy, of course, Islamic fintech and also social finance will feature very strongly. I mentioned earlier, iConnect Fintech in Islamic finance looks at, and Tunku Dani is actually a founding member of iConnect, looks at how problem statements on social finance, when you look at distribution of zakat, how that can be effectively used in helping the asnafs in growing from, you know, coming out from poverty and being able to stand on their own 2 feet. So those are among just one of the initiatives that are currently being muted, and we're talking to other different stakeholders as well as we grow in building this digital economy that can facilitate more and more tech and fintech players in addressing the pain points, the problem statements within the Islamic banking, whether it's takaful, whether it's capital markets or asset management, in helping to see how Malaysia can continue to be at the forefront for Islamic finance. So ultimately, personally for me, it's that collaboration which has been core in growing our industry, and you know, the regulators engaging with private sectors, state agencies, in ensuring that there is a holistic approach or cohesive collaboration within everybody in meeting our objectives, and ensuring that there are opportunities for commercial, for everybody to also have skin in the game in terms of how we can grow together as a nation in being a digitally a success case for the world to follow suit.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Ruslena. To the audience, we are still taking questions that you can pose to the panelists. Do state your name, your email address, and as well as which panelist your question is going to be addressed by. If we are unable to address your question today, the Halal Development Corporation will be emailing the answers to you within 48 hours of this parallel session. So without further ado, let me just go through some of the questions that we've got. Panelists, are you ready? I think we have a question for Puan Farilla. So my eyesight is not great, but let me try and read it. Are the financial systems that's designed for the old economy, are they well suited to the gig economy? Whether the industry is doing enough to cater for the gig workers? I think somebody brought up the gig economy earlier. So could we get your perspective, Noor Farilla?
The short answer is no, it's not suited. Whatever that has been developed, right, for the traditional economy, it's not. But it's an opportunity to innovate, and the innovation can come from really, number one is understanding the behavior of the gig workers. And again, we would be mistaken if we think that there's only one behavior, because there are some gig workers that do it because they want to save money for a new gadget. There are some who prefer the flexibility of time. There are some who actually do it full time. Because that's the skill sets that they have, right? So to be able to serve this segment, we have to understand. And how do we understand? It's all about data points. It's all about the stamina of collecting data, of expanding data points, and of analyzing and employing your algorithms and data science to understand what their behaviors. And also unit economics is very important here, right? How do we reach them? How do we also reduce the cost of acquisition? Because we want to be able to reach a wide variety of customers. And at the end of the day, a bank, we are also committed to responsible financing. So, but it doesn't mean that, okay, let's not do it. It's about what does it take for a bank to be able to do this? And to still and to ultimately be providing responsible financing.
That's an excellent perspective. Does Tunku Dani or Ruslena would like to weigh in on the question on if the industry is doing enough to cater for gig workers from the MDEC perspective as well as from an Islamic fintech perspective? Shall we ask Ruslena first?
Yeah, I think there are ongoing initiatives as an entity as a whole in terms of the gig economy. Some of the things that we could raise is opportunities for the entrepreneurship, opportunities for online business in terms of should these gig workers want to look for say co-working spaces. We do offer that under the Malaysia Digital Hubs. The grants that we offer as well in terms of facilitating that process. And I think, yeah, those are the things that I could just ramble off at the top of my head.
Okay, excellent. Tunku Dani, would you like to weigh in? Actually, the next question is for you, but if you'd like to weigh in on that, let's hear on that first before I read.
Yeah, I think more needs to be done for gig workers. Unfortunately, we can't finance gig workers unless they are set up as a Sindiran Berhad or an enterprise minimum, because personal financing is not allowed according to Securities Commission guidelines. But I think there was a UNCDF program to help gig workers. I think I'm not sure what happened to it, but I don't know if it was supposed to be last year. But yeah, I think it needs to be addressed. Anywhere from banking facilities to EPF is very keen for gig workers, because at the end of the day, they if something happens to them, the car doesn't work, or they have an accident, they can't drive their motorbike, insurance is an issue for them as well. They really need to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. So the next question from the audience is for Tunku Dani. Let me try and read it. Funding is one of the biggest challenges in the startup world. In your experience, Tunku Dani, how was it to convince investors to invest in Muslim or religious focused solutions. In your opinion, was there a particular strategy for this sector?
Yeah, I think as a young startup such as Microleap, funding was an issue. You had to have a good business plan and targets to reach, but also have to have the MVP in place, the minimum viable product. That is why when we started out, first thing we did was look for accelerator programs. These are great for you to sound out your idea. And also if you make through it, through the program, you have the chance to do a demo day. So you pitch to investors, etc. But it also helped us to kind of fine tune our strategy, fine tune our business plan. And then once when you start, it's difficult. No one wants to give money to you because you're a startup, you don't have a business, you have no revenue. So you really have to look around you, friends, family, anything that you can just start to have the minimum viable product. And for a Sharia compliant fintech is even more expensive because you have to have the Sharia advisors in place. There's also regulation. So it is difficult, but you have to keep plugging away. I found that the Securities Commission was actually a very dynamic in terms of being a regulator. They were looking for good ideas, and they heavily focused on the tech element of what we were doing. So we were lucky to have them as a regulator. So once you start getting that, start making revenue, you'll see people more interested in what you're doing and can raise more money. But it is long and it is difficult. So be prepared to have many sleepless nights.
That's true. So thank you to Kudani for sharing that. I can imagine, especially before, at the early part where you don't show as much structure, it would be very difficult to convince the investors. Thank you for sharing your experience. The next question, because we've had one question for Farilla before, I'd like to select the question for Ruslena. Rozina, there's a question for you. In your opinion, what are the salient challenges for Islamic fintech companies to grow in Malaysia?
I think commercial reasoning is very important because when you place apple-to-apple comparison, there is a strong value proposition for Islamic products. Yes, there are additional leg when you come to screening or certification and also the legal documents, but ultimately in the end, it's that ethical solution that you want. Like for example, if I can just give a basic example is your credit cards, right? So in this current pandemic, those who have chosen a conventional credit card, can you imagine the compounding interest that you need to pay? But for under Islamic, you're not allowed to charge compounding interest. It's not permissible. So that's just one particular feature. But there are the uniqueness in choosing ethical products versus, and as Danny also pointed out, we want to see more non-Muslims coming into the picture as you embark on ethical investments, savings, even on consumption of daily needs, because you don't want to go into non-ethical types of child laboring type of industries, for example. And I think as the whole nation, even the country, adopts sustainable development goals, and we build up economic sectors in our improvement, we would see that value proposition being that tipping point for people to choose Islamic over conventional.
Thank you. That's a very interesting perspective. I've got time for one last question, and this question is to Farilla again. So the question to you is, what are the key challenges that Islamic finance faces, and how has the current pandemic exaggerated these challenges? So I know you've touched on some of that earlier. Maybe you can expand on that.
I think right now, the main challenge that we have is really coming out of this pandemic and really hold out the helping hand for the businesses and the individuals in need because of the lockdown that we've had, right? So I think we've done great strides when it comes to vaccination, and hopefully we would be able to progress to probably not the old norm, but the new norm, but economy would be open. So that is still the main challenge of the right now, which is getting out of this pandemic. Now, post that, we don't want to waste the opportunity of a crisis, right? And so where I think the main challenges when it comes to digitalization really is that you start this journey not with the best technology, you start with the change of mindset and enabling environment. And so that is always, there's an inertia to that, I think, for any organizations. So I would leave with that, really it's a mindset and enabling environment that would drive digitalization.
Thank you so much. I think we've run out of time to take any more questions at the session. So before we wrap up the session, I just want to ask each of the panelists, just in one sentence, if there's anything that is the most important takeaway from this parallel session, what would it be for you? Let's start with Tunku Dani. Just briefly, what would be the most important takeaway for you?
For me, is to, if you are a micro and small medium enterprise, is to embrace technology. Obviously, if you are selling food products, Grab and Foodpanda, they charge a high cost, but there are now other platforms, other marketplaces that are actually charging less for you to deliver your food. So, but digitalization is important and needs to be done, as was shown by the pandemic. Early last year, everyone thought it was going to last 3 months, maybe 6 months. It's now been over a year and a half of this pandemic. And if you do not digitalize, you are going to suffer, and your company will probably close. So embrace technology, look forward to it, and grab that opportunity.
That's great, a great takeaway. And let's move to Noor Farilla. Just a quick, brief takeaway, the most important takeaway from today.
Yeah, I think I'm very heartened to see success story, from a fintech, Islamic fintech, and how enabling a government agency is. So I think moving forward, we just have a lot of upside, when it comes to really garnering the entire ecosystem of Islamic finance and halal.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, Ruslena, can we hear what is the biggest takeaway for you from this discussion?
I like to go back to the theme of the session, which is fostering a robust Islamic finance ecosystem through digitalization. Has to be a collaborative effort. There's only so much MDEC can do on our own. And, our success is because of everyone coming together and facilitating the process. So from the fintech players to the communities like Islamic Bank Islam, and also other state agencies in helping us to continue this roadmap in our journey. So that working togetherness, top-down approach from the government in facilitating that process is also very crucial. And we look forward to further engagements with all communities locally and also internationally as we embark on our journey in growing Malaysia's digital economy.
I think that was a great wrap up, very pertinent to the topic of the day. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Halal Development Corporation, I wish to thank our esteemed panelists, Tunku Dani, Noor Farilla, and Roslina for the valuable insights on fostering a robust Islamic finance ecosystem through digitalization. Our heartfelt appreciation also goes out to all of you joining us from across the globe. Thank you for joining the World Halal Business Conference 2021, specifically the parallel session that we have just concluded today. I'm Rozina Aziz, signing out for the day. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you.